Welcome to another Reaper blog tutorial. This is what's new in Reaper 6.48 up to 6.51. There's a lot of little changes and there's a bunch of big changes to the batch converter. But I think even if you don't use the batch converter, these updates are worth installing because they include a lot of little bug fixes that improve the performance and stability of the program. Let's have a look. Let's actually start with a question that has come up a few times, but never really addressed it officially. Do you need to install each update in series? No, actually you don't. You can just grab the latest version from the website. It will have all the previous fixes in there. If you miss one, you don't need to worry about installing that before going to the next one. Let's start off with the 6.48 update. For JSFX, the channel mapper uses drop-down instead of plus and minus buttons to set number of channels. JS channel mapper down mixer from macOS. And the main change here is that instead of a plus or minus button here for the channels, it's now a drop-down list. And you can have big numbers or small numbers, and that's just a little bit quicker to manage. On the Mac, disable input event throttling by default. These options here, throttle mouse events, wheel, swipe, and move, used to be enabled by default, and now they are off by default. This kind of just makes it feel more quick, more like the Windows version, just kind of like less smoothing of motion and things like that. It's a little hard to explain because it's not something that everyone notices. Just wanted to point out that it's not a new option. It's just new that these are disabled. If you've never looked at these settings before, they may have changed on you when you've updated. In any event, it's worth a look and trying out if mouse events throttling for move works with your particular situation or not. And that setting is under Preferences, General, Advanced UI, System Tweaks. Media item ruler, always label item start and end if possible. Pretty simple one. So if you've got an item, we go to Item Settings and Display Item Ruler for, let's say, time. This is something you'll see more at the end of an item where you've got, if you're trimming it, it will show the entire length of the item even if it doesn't fit in the actual like ruler kind of spacing. So yeah, that's what the change is, that it always shows the end and the start position if you resize an item, rather than this kind of being blank because it doesn't line up with the ruler markers. In the preferences, search function also searches mouse over help text. Again, this is a super simple change, but just speeds up looking for things. So let's search for the word internet. So that's found this help text. Deselect this option to prevent Reaper checking for new program updates once per day via the internet. And I don't know if there's any others. No, it's just the one there that uses the word internet. Let's search for memory. And so there's one there, there's one there, and this uses the help text. Searching again, there's one there, and there. That's just an example. That's super helpful to have the mouse over text, the tooltips, actually be searchable. Searching through the preferences is going to be much easier, especially if something is named a certain way, but its function and description are maybe more searchable than the actual function name. Up next, there's a couple small changes for ReaLimit, the new Brickwall limiter plugin added a couple months ago. Rename link control to constant gain. Set default threshold and ceiling both to 0 dB. Here's the ReaLimit plugin, and you probably won't notice really much of a difference here compared to a previous version. The link control is now called constant gain because it could have been confused that it was stereo link before. I think that's why they changed it. And also the default settings are 0 and 0. I think it used to be a -1 dB ceiling was there before. But when constant gain is on and you adjust this, both sliders move by the same amount. Obviously, visually, they have a different scaling. But yeah, they're moving by the same decibel amount. And if that's off, each slider moves independently. And now because the default is set to 0 dB, but you always want to have your Brickwall ceiling at, let's say, -1, we can do that and save that as the default. So click on the plus button, save preset as default. Let's give this a name like start. And now I've got a preset there. And let's remove the plugin, put that plugin back in. And now it's starting at a position of -1. So you probably already knew about the default presets for plugins, but I figured this was a good opportunity to show that again. For ReScript, they've added an option to change the font face. You actually need to go into the Reaper INI file and change a line. So I've actually done this earlier, and I'll show you how to get there. Options, show Reaper resource path in Explorer/Finder. That brings up a Finder window or an Explorer window. And we'll look for reaper.ini. Now at this point, you do need to quit Reaper. So let's quit and don't save. So I've got my reaper.ini. I'm going to open with TextEdit or any plain text editor. Code editor is great for this. Just want to make sure you're not saving it as, with any formatting or anything like that. Before we go any further, what we're actually changing here is the integrated development environment or the code editor that's built into Reaper. When you're editing a JSFX or a ReScript or video processor script, this is the font that you'll see in that code editor. So the line we're looking for is called IDE_font_face. And this is something that you actually have to add manually. So I just added it right underneath the IDE colors. And then you can type in a font name. Be careful about which fonts you choose here because they don't always look good. The default is Courier. Menlo is one of the few that I've tried, and that one looks great in my opinion. I'm going to bring up a code editor in my other version of Reaper, just so we can have a side-by-side comparison. So here's the default Courier font. It looks fine, but I've got that change here set to Menlo, and then you want to save that, and then reopen Reaper. You can't actually change that file while Reaper is running. It won't see the changes. It may even override those changes when you quit, because usually preferences and things are saved to that file when you quit. And so here's the Menlo compared to Courier. I'll zoom in here so you can see the difference. I think they both look fine, but Menlo is just, it kind of has like a thicker line sort of thing. It stands out a bit better. Never mind the colors difference here, because that's just another theme change. But just like the actual kind of weight of the letters looks a little nicer to me. Menlo is a sans serif font, and Courier is a serif font, meaning it has the little hooks at the ends of the D or on the L's, on the I's. It's got the feet. If you're looking for fonts that will work, I would suggest starting with the fixed width font list that you'll find in the font book on Mac. I tried Andiolmano. It looked terrible. I tried Arial. I know that Courier works and Menlo works, but I haven't tried any of the others. Yeah, you can see a full list of your fonts here. On Windows, it would just be the font app or font setting that you can find when you search. Up next is a change for renders. Support jumping to loudest sample in project after render, including dry run render. If I have a little project here and I render it, or I use the dry run render function, and I'll just do that, dry run. And so calculate loudness of master mix within time selection via dry run render. So I'm going to run that. There I can see that it went above 0 for a second. Under the stats menu, I can go to jump to first clip position or jump to loudest sample position in project. Let's do that and close this. And so here is that position where it got the loudest. Pretty simple thing, but yeah, that could be super helpful. And there isn't a specific action for that. You do need to go through that render completed dialog there. Now we're going to jump ahead to the 6.50 updates, and we're going to do a couple of the odds and ends before we get on to the main content, which is the batch converter changes. So for defaults, set default master track pan mode to stereo balance for new projects. Save load master track pan law pan mode with default project settings. This may be a very minor thing that isn't going to affect a lot of users, but it might. Under project settings advanced, we've got pan mode, and these are just different view modes for the different pans that are in Reaper. My preference is stereo pan because it has a balance control and a width control. Dual pan gives you a left and a right pan position that you can put in any position you want. And then there's stereo balance mono pan, and that's the default, which gives you just a single pan knob, whether it's mono or stereo. When you have the master mixer, it looks like this. And the default pan mode is this, just a single pan knob. And if we have a pan law set here, let's say -3, this pan mode and the pan law, if you make any changes to those things, they will be saved when you hit this Save as Default Project Settings button. However, if you are using a default project in your preferences, project settings, when creating new project, use the following project as a template. That's not going to use the default project settings that you would normally find in the project settings window. Hope that makes sense. It's a minor change. Most people are not going to be adjusting the pan on the master track at all, but if you are, maybe that's something to pay attention to. For effects, allow JSFX channel mapper downmixer to change monitoring effects processing channel count. Right, so the monitoring effects. Let's add the channel mapper to the monitoring effects. And if we set this to 4 outs, we can actually change the amount of outputs that are going through the monitoring effects. I actually already use a plugin for this where I've got input 1 and 2 duplicated over to 9 and 10 because the channel mapper plugin did not allow for this before. So I can set this to 10 outputs, clear all. I got 1 and 2, and I've got 1 and 2 also going to 9 and 10. So if I disable this and play this, you can still hear that. It's going out my send to my other computer on 9 and 10. Perfect. So yeah, that could be really useful for you. For media, improve zoomed in peaks performance, especially on compressed media. Improve performance when using large block sizes and small media buffer sizes. So compressed media, that's like MP3s, video files, things like that. When you zoom in on those files, it can sometimes chug a bit when it's switching between the peak file and the actual reading the actual file without a cache file. So that's been improved. You should see a lot less lag zooming in on compressed media. And I don't know if I'll be able to really demonstrate that in this video. I don't have a file handy that I know will do that. They say that's improved, and I tend to trust what they say. Now, for the thing with the block sizes and buffer sizes, block size is your setting when you request a block size in your audio device settings. Looks a little bit different on Windows, but it's the same number. And then there's the buffering page. So things like the media buffer size, if we have a very small media buffer and a large block size, there was some sort of interaction which wasn't ideal before. For MIDI, send note off for active notes when seeking. So seeking is just relocating the play position while playback's happening. And there used to be a stuck note bug when sending out to external hardware that seemed to be unrelated to the settings for reset on play and stop seek. Not all devices would respond to these commands, the reset commands. So REAPER does itself kill a note that was sustaining when you jump to a new position in the song. So hopefully the majority of stuck note issues are resolved at this point, but definitely keep testing. And if you end up with stuck notes, either with plugins or with hardware, try to narrow that down and report your findings on the forum. And now we're into changes for the batch converter. There's a ton of changes here. It's going to take me a couple minutes just to read this, but let's try to get through this. Support converting multiple files in parallel, utilizing multiple CPUs. Improve responsiveness and RAM usage when converting a large file list. Display the number of files and directories in the file list. Display progress bar if conversion takes more than a short time. When adding a directory to the file list, prompt to include subdirectories as well. Option to use source subdirectory structure to create output directories. Option to overwrite original files. Option to suppress notification when finished. Added a save settings button. Reorganize controls to separate settings that are not included in presets. Include dither noise shaping settings with presets. Preset menu item to clear all converter settings. Context menu actions to fit file list columns to screen. Open input or output path. Display item media properties. After cancel conversion, convert and remove buttons offer to affect only converted or not converted yet files or all files. Change default output pattern to source-converted. Delete incomplete output file on user cancel. Don't embed project-specific metadata. Preserve very long metadata correctly. Support track track number, item number, wildcards, which will resolve to the project state at the time the media was added to the file list. Update sample rate wildcard correctly when changing sample rate. Add effects to change processing channel count via pin connector dialog or JSFX channel mapper downmixer. Oh, so yeah, there's a lot of changes there. Let's just start off by having a look at what's visually changed here. At first glance, it's very similar. We're looking at macOS, Big Sur. I've got the rounded buttons option, and I've got dark mode, obviously, on here. So it's going to look a little bit different on Windows, but generally, it's the same sort of thing. On the left, I've got the newest version, REAPER 6.51, and on the right side, I have the older version, 6.49. If we look around the UI, it's mostly the same, but some things have been moved around. There's some new things, and yeah, just a lot more options. The list view is basically the same, but if we right-click, there's a few new options. Things like show input media source properties, input path, output path, and fit columns to screen. The old version, add items, delete, selected items, select all. There really wasn't a lot you could do in that section. Under add, we've got add files, add directory, and add selected media items. Old version, add files, add selected media items. So the remove and clear buttons will work differently if you've already converted things, and if you've canceled a conversion mid-completion, you will have the option of clearing only the ones that didn't complete, for example. Really subtly, we've got 3 items from one directory listed here, and so obviously this updates based on what's in the file list. Old version didn't have anything like that. Under the presets menu, we've got everything that's from the render window options and format settings. So most of these are just things that I've saved for my video editing. And this function to clear all settings will reset the settings in this field, such as fixing the name and setting the resample mode. We now have the option to overwrite original media, which means that if you're converting, let's say, a 24-bit wave to a 16-bit wave, we can overwrite the original. So if we want to keep the same folder, the same name, everything, if we click on overwrite original files, that's going to block out the directory field, the file name field. We can change the format and things like that, but it's going to replace those original files. Use source file directory structure. If we imported a bunch of samples from different folders and rewrite those, it can keep the same folders and subfolders for that, which is pretty cool. After conversion, we have the option to open this directory. We can click on Browse and go to one. Here I just set the directory to the sample library folder. If I click on Open, it's going to bring up my sample library in Finder. The Options field has been rearranged and added to, so we've got dither and noise shaping. The change for those is that gets saved with the presets. We've got the normalize option, resample mode, preserve, if possible, start offset and metadata. Something that was often very confusing before, there was this field for new metadata, and we can enter things, but that doesn't take effect until we actually click on this add new metadata toggle. Now this button is disabled until we're enabling adding new metadata. So that just makes it a lot clearer. Such a small change, but yeah, that's great. For the effects chain, if we add in an effect like the channel mapper, again, and we've got 4 channels, and let's say we make them like this, input 1 and 2 goes to output 1 and 2, 3 and 4, same signal. Now when we convert a file and we change the channels to 4, upmixing to a 4-channel file, convert that, and so it notifies us that it's done. After render, we can right-click and open output path. And the converted one, let's import that. Let's get this first one in the project. So that's a mono file, and the converted file, 4-channel upmixed kind of file now. So potentially that's really useful, using the channel mapper inside of the batch converter. If you have a 5.1 mix where the channels need to be rearranged so that the subwoofer is channel 4, the center channel is swapped between channel 2 and 3, something like that. You could do that with the channel mapper and export a second version or replace the original. And then lastly, if you don't want an alert that it's finished, that pop-up, you can just uncheck that option there. So if we convert this to, let's just add a number to that, start convert. So nothing popped up when this was done. So that's it for what's new in Reaper 6.48 up to 6.51. Didn't really talk about the 6.51 stuff. It's just more bug fixes, regressions from 6.50. Came out only a couple days after. It's important stuff, but not really anything I need to go into depth about. Lots of great stuff with the batch converter. I know it's not something that every user uses, but anyone that has a sample library, whether they're making it themselves, curating it for their own use, whatever, it's a pretty useful thing to have. And it's great to see lots of new functions for that. If you missed any of the previous videos in this series, I go all the way back to Reaper 5.0, covering most of the changelogs over the past, 5-6 years. So tons to learn in there. There will be a link to the playlist down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Support the Reaper blog through Patreon, and visit reaperblog.net for a lot more tutorials.